A millionaire boss gets desperate when he sees an employee who looks like his daughter missing for 12 years. The investigation he launched immediately after revealed secrets buried for over a decade that he could never have imagined. A tech billionaire's world crumbled the moment he saw a familiar face in his company's cafeteria. What happened next will leave you speechless. The bustling headquarters of TechVision Industries in Austin, Texas, was alive with the energy of over 3,000 employees rushing through their morning routines. Glass elevators carried workers to their floors while the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. But today would be different. Today, 48-year-old CEO Jonathan Mitchell would see something that would shake him to his core. Jonathan walked through the main floor with his usual confident stride, his tailored navy suit reflecting his success. Behind him, as always, walked Rebecca Chen, his 55-year-old executive assistant who had been by his side for 15 years. She managed everything from board meetings to his personal schedule with military precision. "Mr. Mitchell, the quarterly review is scheduled for 10:30, Rebecca said, checking her tablet. "The marketing team is waiting in conference room B." Jonathan nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the workspace, always observing, always analyzing. The cafeteria on the 15th floor was packed with employees grabbing their morning coffee and breakfast. Jonathan rarely visited this floor, but today he wanted to personally check on the new employee wellness program. As they walked past the seating area, something made Jonathan freeze completely. At a corner table, laughing with a group of junior developers, sat a young woman who made his heart stop beating. The similarity was impossible, yet undeniable. She had the same auburn hair, the same bright green eyes, and when she smiled, the same small dimple on her left cheek that haunted his dreams every single night. The woman appeared to be in her mid-20s, wearing a simple blue cardigan and holding a coffee mug with both hands, just like someone else used to do. Jonathan's hands began trembling as memories flooded back like a tsunami, threatening to drown him in the middle of his own company. Can you imagine seeing someone who looks exactly like a person you lost 12 years ago? The rational part of Jonathan's mind screamed that it was impossible, but his heart recognized something his brain couldn't accept. This young woman looked exactly like his daughter Emma would look today, if she were still alive. "Rebecca," Jonathan whispered, his voice barely audible above the cafeteria noise. "I need you to find out who that employee is, the woman at the corner table with the blue cardigan." His assistant immediately noticed the change in his demeanor and followed his gaze. Rebecca had worked with Jonathan long enough to recognize when something was seriously wrong, and right now, her boss looked like he had seen a ghost walking among the living. The young woman stood up to refill her coffee, and Jonathan got a clearer view of her profile. His knees nearly buckled. She moved with the same graceful confidence his daughter Emma had shown even as a child. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight tilt of her head when she listened to her colleagues. Even her laugh carried an echo of the past that made Jonathan's chest tighten with an emotion he thought he had buried forever. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" Rebecca asked with genuine concern. Jonathan had built his empire from nothing, survived hostile takeovers, and faced down the toughest investors on Wall Street without flinching. But right now, he looked completely vulnerable, like a man staring at his greatest hope and deepest fear simultaneously. She had never seen him this shaken, not even during the company's darkest financial crisis 3 years ago. Jonathan couldn't take his eyes off the young woman as she returned to her table. When she smiled at something her coworker said, it was Emma's smile. The same radiant expression that used to light up their family home in Denver before everything fell apart. Before that terrible night 12 years ago when his world ended in flames and sirens. Before he lost everything that truly mattered in life. "Get me her employee file," Jonathan managed to say, his voice cracking with emotion. "I need to know everything about her. Her name, her background, where she came from, who hired her, everything." The desperation in his voice was something Rebecca had never heard before, and it worried her deeply. What could possibly cause such a dramatic reaction in the man who had always been her rock of stability? Within an hour, Rebecca returned to Jonathan's corner office on the 40th floor with a manila folder in her hands. Jonathan had been standing by his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the Austin skyline but seeing nothing except the face that had turned his world upside down. When Rebecca knocked, he spun around so quickly that coffee spilled from the mug he had been clutching like a lifeline. "Her name is Sarah Williams," Rebecca began, reading from the file. "She's 24 years old, graduated from the University of Texas with a degree in computer science. She's been working here for 8 months in our software development department. Jonathan listened to every word, his heart pounding harder with each detail. 24 years old. That would be exactly Emma's age if she had survived the accident 12 years ago. The resemblance wasn't just physical. According to her employee records, Sarah was brilliant with computers, just like Emma had been as a child. She had taught herself programming languages at age 10 and built her first website at 12. Emma had been the same way, always ahead of her peers, always creating something new on her computer. The parallel was too strong to be mere coincidence, yet logic told him it had to be. "There's something else, Mr. Mitchell," Rebecca continued carefully. Sarah was adopted. Her adoption records show she was placed with a family in Houston when she was 12 years old, after spending time in foster care. Before that, there's very little information available about her early childhood. Jonathan's coffee mug slipped from his hands, shattering on the marble floor, but he didn't even notice the mess. Foster care at age 12, the same age Emma would have been when she supposedly died in that horrific car accident. Jonathan's mind raced with possibilities that seemed impossible, yet the timing was too perfect to ignore. Could the unthinkable actually be true? Had his daughter somehow survived and ended up in the foster system? The questions multiplied faster than he could process them, each one more desperate than the last. That night, Jonathan sat in his empty penthouse apartment, surrounded by photo albums he hadn't opened in years. With trembling hands, he turned the pages, studying every picture of Emma from birth to age 12. The resemblance to Sarah Williams was undeniable. They shared the same facial structure, the same expressive eyes, even the same way of smiling with their whole face. It was like looking at a grown-up version of his lost daughter. He pulled out his phone and called his former private investigator, Marcus Rodriguez, who had spent 5 years searching for any trace of Emma after the accident. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me," Jonathan said without preamble. "I need you to investigate someone named Sarah Williams. I'm sending you her information right now." His hands shook as he typed out the details, hope and fear battling in his chest with equal intensity. The official report had been clear 12 years ago. Emma Mitchell, age 12, had died in a car accident along with her mother Catherine during a camping trip in Colorado. Their car had gone off a mountain road during a storm, caught fire, and by the time rescue teams arrived, there was nothing left but twisted metal and ashes. The bodies were so badly burned that identification had been difficult, but dental records confirmed their identities. But what if those records had been wrong? What if somehow, impossibly, Emma had survived and ended up lost in the system? Jonathan had read stories of mix-ups in hospitals, of children being misidentified after disasters. It was rare, but not impossible. As crazy as it sounded, the woman working in his company could actually be his daughter, grown up and living under a different name, with no memory of her real family. If you've ever lost someone close to you, you know that desperate feeling of hoping against hope. Leave a like if this story is hitting you right in the heart, and tell me in the comments. What would you do if you thought you saw someone you lost years ago? The next morning, Jonathan could barely concentrate during his executive meeting. His mind kept drifting to the cafeteria, wondering if Sarah would be there again. He had instructed Rebecca to discreetly gather more information without arousing suspicion, but patience had never been his strong suit. Every minute felt like an hour as he waited for answers that could change everything he believed about his past. During lunch break, Jonathan found an excuse to walk through the development floor where Sarah worked. He spotted her at her desk, focused intently on her computer screen, typing code with the same intense concentration Emma used to show when working on her school projects. When Sarah looked up and accidentally made eye contact with him, Jonathan felt his heart skip a beat. Those were Emma's eyes, there was no doubt about it. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mitchell," Sarah said politely, standing up from her desk. Her voice was warm and respectful, but there was no recognition in her eyes, no spark of memory. To her, he was just the CEO making his rounds. But to Jonathan, hearing her voice felt like hearing an echo from the past, familiar yet strange, like a melody he couldn't quite place, but knew he had heard before. "How are you settling in here at Tech Vision?" Jonathan asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Sarah smiled, and once again, it was Emma's smile, bright and genuine. "I love it here, sir. The team has been incredibly welcoming, and the projects we're working on are exactly the kind of challenges I've always dreamed of tackling." Her enthusiasm reminded him so much of Emma's passion for technology that it physically hurt. As Jonathan walked away, he noticed something that made him stop dead in his tracks. On Sarah's desk, barely visible among her work materials, was a small stuffed elephant with a red ribbon around its neck. It was identical to the one he had given Emma for her 7th birthday, the one she had named Peanut and carried everywhere. Could it really be the same elephant? Or was his desperate mind seeing connections that didn't exist? That evening, Marcus Rodriguez called with preliminary findings that sent Jonathan's world spinning even faster. "Jonathan, there's definitely something strange about Sarah Williams's background," Marcus said, his voice heavy with significance. "The adoption records are sealed, which isn't unusual, but I found some inconsistencies in the timeline that don't add up. There are gaps in her documentation that suggest her early history might have been deliberately obscured." Marcus had discovered that Sarah's adoptive parents, Robert and Linda Williams, had died in a house fire when she was 18. She had lived with them for 6 years, from age 12 to 18, but before that, there was almost no official record of her existence. No school records, no medical history, nothing that would normally exist for a child. It was as if Sarah Williams had materialized out of thin air at age 12. "There's more," Marcus continued. "I managed to track down a social worker who handled cases in the Houston area around that time. She remembers a girl who was found wandering alone after a major car accident in Colorado. The girl had severe trauma and couldn't remember her name or family. They tried for months to identify her, but when no one claimed her, she entered the foster system." Jonathan's hands gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The timeline matched perfectly. A girl found after a car accident in Colorado, the same state where Emma and Catherine had supposedly died. A girl with no memory, no identity, who would have been exactly Emma's age. The social worker had retired years ago, but she remembered the case because it was so unusual. The girl had been highly intelligent, especially with computers, and had recovered physically but never regained her memories of life before the accident. Jonathan spent the entire weekend pacing his apartment, wrestling with the most important decision of his life. Should he approach Sarah directly with his suspicions, or would that traumatize her if he was wrong? What if she really was Emma, but had built a new life and didn't want to remember the past? The weight of possibility and uncertainty was crushing him from the inside, making every breath feel like a struggle against drowning. He pulled out his laptop and began researching memory loss after trauma. What he found both encouraged and terrified him. Dissociative amnesia was real, especially in children who experienced severe trauma. The mind could completely block out painful memories as a survival mechanism. If Emma had witnessed her mother's death and barely survived herself, it would make perfect sense for her brain to protect itself by forgetting everything from before that moment. Monday morning arrived like a death sentence. Jonathan could barely eat breakfast, his stomach twisted in knots of anticipation and dread. He had made his decision during the sleepless night. He would find a way to spend time with Sarah, to look for more definitive proof before revealing his suspicions. If she really was Emma, he needed to be absolutely certain before potentially destroying the life she had built for herself. Rebecca noticed his distress immediately when he arrived at the office. "Sir, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all this weekend?" she asked with motherly concern. Jonathan appreciated her worry, but there was no way to explain that he might have found his supposedly dead daughter working 3 floors below them. The situation was too fragile, too impossible to put into words, until he knew for certain. "I need you to arrange something," Jonathan told Rebecca. "I want to personally review some of the code Sarah Williams has been working on. Set up a meeting for this afternoon, but make it seem routine, like part of our standard quality assessment program." Rebecca looked puzzled but nodded. She had learned to trust Jonathan's instincts even when his requests seemed unusual. Little did she know that this meeting could reunite a father with his long-lost daughter. The conference room felt like a courtroom where Jonathan's entire future would be decided. At 3 o'clock sharp, Sarah entered carrying her laptop and a portfolio of her recent projects. She wore a simple black dress that made her green eyes even more striking, and when she smiled at Jonathan, it was like Emma walking back into his life after 12 years of believing she was gone forever. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Sarah," Jonathan said, gesturing for her to sit across from him at the polished wooden table. "I've heard excellent things about your work from the development team." Sarah beamed with pride, clearly pleased that the CEO had noticed her contributions. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I put everything I have into my projects here. Tech Vision feels like home to me. As Sarah opened her laptop and began explaining her coding projects, Jonathan watched her hands move across the keyboard. Emma had always been left-handed, and Sarah was left-handed too. Emma had a small scar on her right wrist from falling off her bike at age 8, and Jonathan's heart nearly stopped when he noticed an identical scar in the exact same spot on Sarah's wrist. The evidence was mounting, but he needed more. This security protocol I developed, Sarah explained enthusiastically, uses a layered encryption method that I've been perfecting since I was a teenager. I've always been fascinated by digital security, even as a kid. Jonathan listened carefully, but what caught his attention wasn't her technical explanation. It was the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, exactly the same habit Emma had shown when working on difficult problems. Tell me in the comments, if you were Jonathan, would you reveal your suspicions now, or would you keep investigating? Because what he's about to discover will change both of their lives forever, and there's no going back once the truth comes out. During their conversation, Sarah mentioned that she loved working late in the office because it reminded her of staying up all night as a child, working on computer projects when she couldn't sleep. I've always had trouble sleeping, she said with a small laugh. My adoptive parents used to joke that I was part vampire because I did my best work between midnight and dawn. Emma had been exactly the same way, suffering from insomnia, but using those sleepless hours productively. Jonathan decided to take a calculated risk. That's interesting. Do you remember much from before you were adopted? He asked as casually as possible. Sarah's expression shifted slightly, a shadow crossing her face. Not really, she admitted. I was in an accident when I was 12. Head injury caused some memory problems. Everything before that is pretty much a blank slate. The confirmation hit Jonathan like lightning, but he forced himself to remain calm. I'm sorry to hear about your accident, Jonathan said gently, but it sounds like you've built an amazing life for yourself despite that challenge. Sarah nodded, but there was something wistful in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder about my life before, you know? Like, were there people who loved me? Did I have a family somewhere who might still be wondering what happened to me? Her words cut straight through Jonathan's heart like a knife. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Sarah showing more of her work while Jonathan looked for additional signs. When she laughed at something, it was Emma's laugh. When she pushed her hair back from her face, it was Emma's gesture. When she explained complex coding concepts with passionate enthusiasm, it was Emma's intelligence and love of learning shining through every word. As the meeting ended, Sarah gathered her materials and stood to leave. Thank you again for your time, Mr. Mitchell. It means the world to me that you're interested in my work. She paused at the door and turned back with a smile. You know, you seem really familiar to me somehow. I know that sounds crazy since we just met, but there's something about you that feels safe, like home. With that, she left, leaving Jonathan alone with tears streaming down his face. That night, Jonathan called Marcus Rodriguez with urgent desperation in his voice. Marcus, I need you to get me dental records, DNA comparisons, anything that can definitively prove whether Sarah Williams is Emma Mitchell. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. I need to know the truth. His voice broke as he spoke, 12 years of grief and hope colliding in his chest like opposing storms. Marcus had been expecting this call. I already started working on it after our last conversation, he admitted. I had a feeling this case was going to get personal. The problem is getting comparison samples without raising suspicions. We need something of Sarah's that contains DNA, and we need to do this ethically and legally. Jonathan understood the complications, but the waiting was killing him slowly from the inside. Meanwhile, Sarah was having her own strange experience. Ever since meeting with Mr. Mitchell, she had been having vivid dreams that felt more like memories trying to surface. She dreamed of a man with kind eyes reading her bedtime stories, of learning to ride a bike in a large backyard, of building a treehouse with someone who called her his little princess. The dreams felt real, but they couldn't be memories because she didn't remember having a father figure in her early childhood. The next day, Sarah found herself distracted at work, unable to focus on her coding projects. She kept thinking about Mr. Mitchell and the strange sense of familiarity she had felt during their meeting. There was something about his eyes, the way he had looked at her with such intense attention, that reminded her of the father figure from her dreams. But that was impossible, wasn't it? During her lunch break, Sarah made an impulsive decision. She went to the company library and looked up old articles about Tech Vision Industries and its founder. What she found in a 5-year-old business magazine made her hands tremble. The article mentioned that Jonathan Mitchell had lost his wife and daughter in a tragic accident 12 years earlier, and that the loss had driven him to build his company as a way to honor their memory. The article included a family photo from before the tragedy. Sarah stared at the picture for a long time, studying the faces of Jonathan Mitchell, his wife Catherine, and their daughter Emma. The little girl in the photo had the same green eyes as Sarah, the same auburn hair, the same bright smile. Could it be possible that she was looking at her own childhood photo? The idea seemed insane, but the resemblance was undeniable and deeply unsettling. Sarah printed the article and took it home to her small apartment. She spread the pages across her kitchen table and studied every detail. The more she looked at young Emma Mitchell, the more familiar the face became. It wasn't just a resemblance anymore. It was like looking in a mirror that reflected 12 years into the past. The realization that she might actually be Emma Mitchell hit her like a physical blow. That evening, Sarah called her deceased adoptive mother's sister, Aunt Helen, who lived in San Antonio. "Aunt Helen, I need to ask you something important about my adoption. Do you remember anything about where I came from before Robert and Linda took me in?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, filled with the weight of secrets that had been kept for over a decade. "Sarah, honey, your adoptive parents made me promise never to tell you this," Aunt Helen said slowly. "But since they're both gone now, maybe it's time you knew the truth. You weren't just any foster child. You were a special case. The social workers believed you came from a wealthy family, but you had complete amnesia and no identification. They tried for months to find your real family, but nobody came forward to claim you." Aunt Helen continued, with a voice heavy with emotion. "Linda always wondered if someone out there was still looking for you, still missing you. She used to say that somewhere there might be parents who never stopped hoping you were alive. We kept some of the original paperwork from your placement, including a police report from the accident. It's in a box in my attic if you want to see it." The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work and drove the 3 hours to San Antonio to meet with Aunt Helen. The elderly woman led Sarah up to her dusty attic, where she pulled out a cardboard box labeled "Sarah's Documents" in faded handwriting. Inside were papers that Sarah had never seen before, including a police report that made her hands shake as she read it. The report described a single car accident on a mountain road in Colorado. 2 fatalities: Catherine Mitchell, age 39, and Emma Mitchell, age 12. But at the bottom of the report, there was a handwritten note that had been added later. Child initially reported deceased was later found alive but severely injured 3 miles from crash site. Victim transported to Denver General Hospital with severe trauma and memory loss. Identity unknown. Sarah stared at the document, reading it over and over again. According to this report, Emma Mitchell hadn't died in the accident. She had survived, been found days later, and taken to a hospital where she couldn't remember her own name. The dates matched perfectly with Sarah's entry into the foster care system. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Among the other documents was a small envelope containing personal items that had been found with Sarah when she entered foster care. Inside was a hospital bracelet with Jane Doe written on it, a small keychain with the letters EM engraved on it, and most shocking of all, a singed photograph showing a man, woman, and child standing in front of a Christmas tree. The man in the photo was unmistakably Jonathan Mitchell, looking 12 years younger. Sarah drove back to Austin in a daze, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had discovered. She wasn't just Sarah Williams, adopted orphan with no past. She was Emma Mitchell, daughter of the billionaire CEO who had been reviewing her work projects, searching for signs of the child he thought he had lost forever. The man who felt like home was actually her father. Back in Austin, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at the photograph and the police report, trying to process the enormity of what she had learned. She had a father who was alive, who had been looking for her, who had built an empire while grieving for a daughter who was actually working 3 floors below his office every single day. The cruel irony of the situation was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, Jonathan was going through his own crisis. Marcus Rodriguez had called with preliminary DNA results from a coffee cup Sarah had discarded in the company cafeteria. The mitochondrial DNA was a match with samples from Emma's childhood medical records. The test wasn't 100% conclusive, but combined with all the other evidence, it painted a clear picture. Sarah Williams was Emma Mitchell, and she was alive, healthy, and working in his company. Jonathan spent that entire night walking the halls of his empty penthouse trying to figure out how to approach Sarah with the truth. How do you tell someone that their entire identity is based on amnesia? How do you explain that you're the father they don't remember? That they've been mourning a mother who died saving them? That 12 years of separation was all due to a tragic misunderstanding? The next morning, Jonathan made a decision that terrified him. He would tell Sarah the truth, show her the evidence, and hope that somewhere deep in her subconscious mind, she would remember the love they had shared before the accident tore their family apart. He had Rebecca clear his schedule for the entire afternoon and arrange a private meeting with Sarah in his personal conference room. But before Jonathan could make that call, his assistant knocked on his door with an urgent expression. "Mr. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal and extremely important. It's Sarah Williams, and sir, she looks like she's been crying." Jonathan's heart stopped. Somehow Sarah had discovered the truth on her own, and she was here for answers. Sarah entered Jonathan's office carrying a manila envelope, her eyes red from crying but her jaw set with determination. She had spent the entire morning rehearsing what she would say, how she would confront the man who might be her father. But now that she was face to face with him, all her planned words disappeared. Instead, she simply placed the envelope on his desk and said, "I think we need to talk about Emma Mitchell." Jonathan's hands trembled as he opened the envelope and saw the police report, the photograph, and the hospital bracelet. His daughter, his brilliant, beautiful Emma, had been alive all these years, living under a different name just a few miles away from him. The weight of 12 years of unnecessary grief crashed down on him like an avalanche, leaving him struggling to breathe. "I found these documents yesterday," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. "According to this police report, Emma Mitchell didn't die in that car accident 12 years ago. She survived, lost her memory, and disappeared into the foster care system. I think I'm Emma Mitchell. I think you're my father." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across 12 years of separation. Jonathan stood up slowly, his legs unsteady, and walked around his desk to stand in front of Sarah. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. This wasn't just a young woman who looked like his daughter. This was his daughter grown up, brilliant and beautiful, standing in his office after 12 years of believing she was dead. The miracle he had prayed for every night was standing right in front of him. "Emma," Jonathan whispered, reaching out tentatively to touch her face. Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes and leaned into his hand. And somehow, despite 12 years of amnesia, it felt familiar. It felt like coming home. "I never stopped looking for you," Jonathan said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped believing you might still be out there somewhere." What happened next was something that no amount of money or success could have prepared Jonathan for. Sarah, his lost daughter Emma, stepped forward and hugged him with the desperation of someone who had been unconsciously missing something her entire life. The embrace felt like puzzle pieces clicking into place, like a song finding its missing harmony, like a broken heart finally beginning to heal after 12 years of mourning. "I used to have dreams," Sarah whispered against his shoulder. "Dreams of a man who called me his little princess, who taught me how to code, who read me stories about brave girls who could solve any problem. I thought they were just fantasies, but they were memories, weren't they?" Jonathan nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Those bedtime stories had been real. The coding lessons had been real. The love had been real, and it had survived even when memory couldn't. They spent the next 3 hours in Jonathan's office sharing 12 years of stories. Jonathan showed Sarah photo albums from her childhood, videos of her first steps, recordings of her singing happy birthday to her mother. With each image, more memories began surfacing in Sarah's mind, like stars appearing as the sun set on her amnesia. She remembered building her first computer with Jonathan's help, remembered the treehouse in their backyard, remembered her mother's laugh. Sarah told Jonathan about her life in foster care, about Robert and Linda Williams who had loved her like their own daughter, about her struggles in college, about her dreams of working for a tech company just like TechVision. The irony that she had unconsciously chosen to work for her father's company wasn't lost on either of them. Some connections, it seemed, were stronger than memory loss. "There's something I need to show you," Sarah said, pulling something out of her purse. It was the small stuffed elephant with the red ribbon that Jonathan had noticed on her desk. "I've carried this everywhere since I can remember. The social worker said it was clutched in my hand when they found me after the accident. I never knew why it felt so important, but I couldn't bear to be separated from it. Jonathan stared at the stuffed elephant, overcome with emotion. His name is Peanut, he said softly. I gave him to you for your 7th birthday because you were afraid of the dark. You said Peanut would protect you from nightmares. Sarah's eyes widened as another memory surfaced, this one crystal clear. She remembered being 7 years old, hugging Peanut tight, feeling safe because her daddy had given her a guardian elephant who would watch over her dreams. The reunion that should have been joyful was also heartbreaking, because it came with the knowledge that Catherine, Sarah's mother, really had died in that accident 12 years ago. Jonathan had to explain that while Sarah had survived, her mother hadn't been as lucky. They grieved together for the woman who had loved them both, for the family dinners they would never share, for the mother-daughter moments that had been lost forever. She saved you, Jonathan told Sarah through his tears. The police report said she threw herself over you when the car started to roll. That's why you survived with just a head injury while she didn't make it. Your mother died protecting you, and her last act of love gave me the miracle of getting you back. Sarah cried for the mother she couldn't remember but had always missed, understanding now why she had always felt like something was missing from her life. But even in their grief, there was overwhelming joy. Father and daughter had found each other against impossible odds. Sarah wasn't just an employee anymore. She was Emma Mitchell, the little girl who had grown up to be everything Jonathan had hoped she would become. Intelligent, kind, successful, and strong enough to survive 12 years of believing she was someone else entirely. As the sun set over Austin, Jonathan and Sarah sat in his office making plans for their future together. They would take it slowly, allowing Sarah's memories to return naturally while building new ones together. They would visit Catherine's grave together, honor the woman who had brought them both so much love. They would be a family again, not the same family they had been 12 years ago, but something new and precious, born from loss, and found again through miracle. 6 months later, Sarah Emma had legally reclaimed her original name and moved into the guest wing of Jonathan's house, the same house where she had spent the first 12 years of her life. Every day brought new memories surfacing, like photographs developing in the darkroom of her healing mind. She remembered her childhood bedroom, the kitchen where she and Catherine had baked cookies, the backyard where Jonathan had taught her to throw a baseball. Jonathan had never been happier. Having Emma back in his life gave him purpose beyond business success. They worked together at Tech Vision now, with Emma leading the company's new cybersecurity division. She had inherited not just his intelligence but also his drive to help others, and together they were developing technology to help locate missing children, ensuring that other families wouldn't have to endure 12 years of unnecessary separation. The stuffed elephant Peanut now sat proudly on Emma's desk in her new corner office, a symbol of the love that had survived memory loss, tragedy, and time itself. Colleagues who had known Sarah Williams were amazed by her transformation, not because she had changed, but because she had finally become fully herself, complete with the confidence that comes from knowing where you belong in the world. Emma established a foundation in her mother Catherine's name, providing support for children aging out of foster care and families dealing with memory loss after trauma. She spoke at conferences about her experience, giving hope to other families who had lost children and encouraging them to never give up searching. Her story became an inspiration to thousands of people who had given up hope of finding their missing loved ones. The greatest miracle wasn't just that Emma had survived the accident or that she had found her way back to her father's company. The greatest miracle was that love had survived everything that tried to destroy it. Memory loss couldn't erase it, time couldn't diminish it, and tragedy couldn't break it. Jonathan and Emma's bond had waited patiently for 12 years, ready to reawaken the moment they were reunited, stronger than ever because of everything they had overcome to find each other again. Sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that remind us that love never truly dies. It just waits patiently for the right moment to shine again. Jonathan and Emma's reunion proves that family bonds are stronger than amnesia, more powerful than time, and more enduring than tragedy. Their story shows us that miracles don't always look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they come disguised as ordinary moments that change everything forever. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do if you found someone you thought you had lost forever. Have you ever experienced a reunion that felt like a miracle? Share your story because your experience might give hope to someone else who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in the power of love, hope, and never giving up on the people who matter most. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on what's possible when we refuse to stop believing in miracles. Thank you for watching, and remember that somewhere out there someone might be waiting for you to find them, just like Emma was waiting to be found by the father who never stopped looking for his little princess.